Democrat and Republic. We don't, the dispensation or whatever has changed enormously in America. It used to be, as you will well know, that the South was democratic. It was called the Democratic South. It was the heartland of the Democratic vote, the blue vote on the map. That has changed enormously. And now it's states like your splendid Wisconsin, which is lovely, except when I was there it was always minus 30, so it was like quite tricky to see a lot of it. But, so we don't really know. We just think the Democrat is vaguely liberal and left-wing, and a Republican is mostly, at the best, laissez-faire, anti-government, at worst, neoconservative, right-wing Christian Republican sense that we find pretty uncomfortable, or a lot of us do. So I think we wanted a change, but if that same man, Obama, I think there would have been a great deal more ease about him coming in as a Republican, in the same way that if Colin Powell, it was an interesting time when Colin Powell, it seemed, could have been the candidate. Colin Powell, who seemed to have dignity and intelligence, was a proven successful general in his own way and chief of staff. As far as I know, he was offered by the Republican Party the nomination and turned it down for all kinds of reasons. Who knows why anybody turns down a nomination? The cynic will say because he's got a skeleton in the cupboard that he knows the press will find out. The more charitable spirit will say, well, because, who needs that kind of thing after the career he's had? But if Colin Powell had stood instead of George W., I think a lot of Europeans would have said, no, it's okay, we can deal with that. So maybe it's, because I don't think we really get what it is to be Republican.
It's an irony, isn't it, that George W. Bush, for all his faults, created the most diverse cabinet in American history, yes. Appointed not one but 2 African Americans as his Secretary of State, and
one of whom was quite unashamedly a woman.
The great thing about Condoleezza Rice is that people didn't get to hate her because she was black or because she was a woman. It's because she was incompetent. Yes.
She was
and terrifying. But he, in important ways, apart from being such a dreadful president that the Democrats were encouraged, enabled Obama to run in a way that even Bill Clinton hadn't been able to do.
No, I think that's a very good point. On the other hand, you looked at Cheney and Rumsfeld, sort of done up in coats. They looked so exactly like the Soviet leaders in the 1960s waving at tanks. I mean, they were almost identical physically, the same grey pallor, the same merciless... And Cheney... The thing that scared the Jesus out of me was that Cheney didn't care if anybody liked him. I thought that I really disliked politicians' desire to be loved and their anxiousness to spin things so that people saw the best side of them. Cheney didn't give a toss. He would just kind of grin like that, as would Rumsfeld, if someone accused him of unbelievable corruption with their private companies, unbelievable coercion of, unbelievable use of, sanctioning of torture. He didn't care what we thought. Go to hell, we don't care. And that is actually more frightening than... So I think no matter how diverse and pluralist the cabinet may have been, in the end you just think of Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and Cheney and your heart is chilled.
We have time for one more question, which will come from the gentleman there.
You talk about the sense of humour, the American sense of humour, and we haven't really you haven't mentioned so much the British sense of humour, but do you think they differ hugely? And if so, what accounts for that difference?
It's a really good point. I think, it strikes at the heart of what is American optimism is a really important thing, but not only optimism, but a refusal to see oneself in a bad light, or, one could talk about this for far too long, but if you go to an American bookshop, by far the biggest section is self-help and improvement. The idea that life is refinable and improvable, and that you can learn a technique for anything, whether it's lovemaking, being a businessman, a marriage, cooking, losing weight, Whatever it is, there's an NLP way of doing it, there's an Anthony Robbins way of doing it, there's a things they didn't teach you at Harvard way of doing it. There's an unbelievable sense that life is improvable, that you can be lectured at, or indeed given a sermon at. You know, it's the Protestant base of America, that things are done by text and by works, as opposed to by submission and by, you know, a doctrine in the way that the higher church, you know, European, you know, rump, we still believe. And there is a sense of original sin in Europe. I mean, this is a bizarre theory that I won't push to its limit, but when it comes to comedy, it's satisfactorily, I think, obvious that the American comic hero is a wisecracker who is above his material and who is above the idiots around him. And the British comic, put it this way, the American comic hero, like John Belushi or someone like that, you know that scene in Animal House where there's a fellow playing folk music on a guitar, and John Belushi picks up the guitar and destroys it. And the cinema loved it because he just smashes it and then waggles his eyebrows at the camera. Everyone says, God, he's so great. Well, a British comedian would want to play the folk singer. We want to play the failure. All the great British comic heroes are people who want life to be better and on whom life craps from a terrible height, and whose sense of dignity is constantly compromised by the world letting them down. They want to wear a tie. They're not quite smart enough to wear an old school tie because they're kind of lower middle class. They are Arthur Lowe in Dad's Army. They are Anthony Aloysius Hancock. They are Basil Fawlty. They are Del Boy. They are Blackadder. They're not quite the upper echelons, and they try to be decent and right. Everything tries to be proper. They're even David Brent from The Office. And their lack of dignity is embarrassing. They are a failure. They are an utter failure. They're brought up to expect empire and respect and decency and being able to wear a blazer in public, and everyone around them just goes... Whereas the American hero is the smart talk. He's Jim Carrey and he's Ben Stiller and he's, you know, whoever. He just goes all the way back. They can wisecrack their way out of any situation. They win the girl. They're smarter. They've got the biggest knob in the room. The British guy arrives at the room and says, oh my God, I've left my knob behind. I haven't even got one. And in a sense, comedy is the microcosm that allows us to examine the entire difference between our two cultures. Ours is bathed in failure, but we make a glory of our failure. We celebrate it. We love the fact that every great British comic hero can go into a dictionary. He's a bit of a Basil Fawlty. He's a bit of a Captain Mannering. He's a bit of a Steptoe. He's a bit of a Baldric. He's a bit of a Blackadder. He's a bit of a this. They're characters that we recognise, all of them so flawed as to be an utter disaster. But you can't do that with American comedy. You can't say he's a bit of who's that chap in Friends, or he's a bit of a, it doesn't really work. They're not characters at all. They're just brilliant repositories of fantastic killer one-liners.
We have to go, but in name-dropping terms, we few, happy few, have been able to say that we've spent an hour with Stephen Fry, and it's been a joy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
It's premiere time next tonight here on Sky Arts 1. Sandy Toksvig is in the chair and Sue Perkins and Chris Addison are your team captains. For all new What the Dickens, stay where you are, it's just moments away.